My name is Bruce Woerner. I'm with Woerner CO2 Consulting now, and I've been doing this for about 2.5 years and have had the pleasure of being at 3 gasworld CO2 summits now.
Absolutely, and we're here today to discuss the North American CO2 Summit 2025. You kicked it off in the first session by discussing policy. So what changes have we seen in terms of CO2 policy and fuel credits in recent times?
Good question, Tom. The obvious, very surprising to me and most people who follow it is with the new administration de-emphasizing carbon and the environment, we did not expect to see the increase in the value of the 45Q credits from $60 to $85 a ton. And more importantly, we thought 45Z, which is a credit if you're selling into the fuel industry, would go away entirely. Instead, it was actually extended through 2029, and that will have a serious impact on the ethanol industry for the better. That ethanol plants, most of them should be able to qualify for at least a portion of that and will greatly elevate their profitability. However, it might put a little more pressure on sources of them deciding they're making so much money now on 45Z, the relative value of the CO2 price that they get may lead them to decide not to continue to supply, which is 40% of the sources obviously being ethanol.
Do you think we are seeing a period of stability within US CO2 or clean energy policy, or are we still in quite a volatile time?
If it was the CO2 industry has been a very nice, stable environment, as we've discussed for the past year or two. Policy is pretty volatile. It is not frequent that it changes with such a dramatic degree in such a short period of time. And now there's talk that perhaps 45Q credits could be endangered. I don't think that's the case, but I defer to the experts.
And to look at the CO2 market, we've been in a relatively steady period for CO2 over the last year, which has been a nice relief for all of us, I think. Do you think this is something that will continue going into next year?
I don't see a big change, Tom, but as I tried to point out at the discussion, is the industry historically, it's been a game of sourcing, and sources always go away. That all the new capacity that's been added, over the past 20 years, basically it's been to replace sources that were lost prior to having these policy issues of CCUS and 45Q and Z potentially accelerating that pace, and also the voluntary decision of especially European countries who want to reduce their emission from well sources, and with the U.S. being very dependent upon the Jackson Dome and other well sources, that could become a deciding factor as those contracts expire, many of them in the next 3 to 5 years.
And on sourcing and facilities, as these existing facilities do continue to close, how are we going to replace that over time?
As I mentioned in my presentation, Tom, I've been beating the drum for the past couple of years about RNG. So unfortunately, they're small sources. The good news, though, is there should be many of them, as my client Vanguard is expecting to do 30 or more of these plants in the next 5 years. Fuel cells, we heard from Ivor, and we've spoken with Bloom and others. Fuel cells will be built for data centers, and they offer a relatively high concentration of CO2 and should be readily attainable. And I never would have thought that I'd be standing here in 2025 saying that low purity sources can be viable, but I now have 2 clients who I am reasonably confident that they will be making some plans to capture low purity 300 ton a day plants in the next year. They'll make the commitment, I believe.
Fantastic. And looking towards next year, we're going to be returning to the US in 2026 for our event in New Orleans, as we announced today. What do you expect the talking points to be over the next 12 months and perhaps even at that event in a year's time?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm not that prescient, but I will try to handle that one. I wish you'd better prepared me for this, Tom. You're throwing me a very tough pitch at the end here, but as I mentioned in the panel discussion, I really think the favorable thing is the industrial gas companies had been so enamored with hydrogen, and it was sucking all the capital out of their budgets into hydrogen and pursuing mobile hydrogen mobility and clean hydrogen projects. There was nothing left for CO2. So the good news is, I think as decent sources develop, at least now the industry will be in a position where they have the wherewithal and the bandwidth of the resources of the personnel as well as the capital to deploy in capturing and building some of these new sources.
Fantastic. Well, no more tricky questions for me, but if you had one final message to those watching this who maybe couldn't make the event this year, what would be your message to them?
My message to them, Tom, is for me personally, this was the best of the 3 conferences I've attended, not only for the panel discussions and what I've learned, and as I talked to so many people throughout the course of these 3 days, I think most people shared my sentiment that this was an excellent use of their time, the efficiency of all the networking that you can do in a compact period of time. You can meet with vendors, producers, manufacturers of equipment, learn what's happening in the industry. And this is the highlight of my year, and that's why last year it was my wife's birthday, and I said, I'm sorry, my dear, I love you, but I must be at this conference. It's vital.
Fantastic, and we'll try to not put it on your wife's birthday in the future. But Bruce Woerner, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you, Tom.